up, Taiwan? I'm Erika Liu with news from here in Taiwan and around the world. A man who pulled out a knife on a high-speed train has been arrested in central Taiwan. As Cadence Quaranta reports, it's the latest in a string of violent incidents on Taiwan's public transportation.
Panic on Taiwan's high-speed rail after a man took out a knife and stabbed it into a tray table. Railway police say the man was sitting on the floor, blocking the entrance to a train car. He became upset after a woman stepped over him to enter the car and later went over and punched her. When other passengers jumped up to help, the man pulled out a knife from his backpack. Railway police say the suspect got off the train in Taipei and fled. Police tracked him down and arrested him in central Taiwan a day later. He apologized over the incident. Railway police say he could face up to 2 years in prison for public intimidation. This is just the latest case of people pulling out knives on public transportation in Taiwan this year. Earlier this month, a woman attacked a high school student with a knife on the Taipei MRT, and in May, a man stabbed 2 people on the Taichung MRT. Some members of the public say the latest incident has worried them.
当然是担心自己的安全，还有身边人的安全嘛。希望尽量不要有这种事情再发生。
Railway police say they have begun to step up their presence across Taiwan's rail network, patrolling train cars for any suspicious activity and working with Taiwan's high-speed rail company to increase its own security personnel, aiming to reassure passengers of their safety. John Su and Cadence Quaranta for TaiwanPlus.
President Lai Ching-te is seeking to improve economic ties with Europe through a trade deal known as an Economic Partnership Agreement. But as Chris Gorin reports, European officials may not be as enthusiastic as Lai.
President Lai Ching-te says a new economic agreement with the European Union could protect global supply chains as he opens an economic forum here in Taipei. The EU is Taiwan's #1 source of foreign direct investment and is Taiwan's 4th largest trading partner, reaching about $74 billion in trade last year. In front of business leaders and trade officials from both Taiwan and Europe, Lai again called for the two sides to establish a so-called Economic Partnership Agreement, or EPA.
Such an agreement would deepen our mutually beneficial partnership. This would not only make both our economies more resilient and secure, but also ensure the stable operation of global supply chains.
For several years now, Taiwan has been seeking a different type of agreement specifically for easing investment rules, known as a bilateral investment agreement. However, EU officials have previously said such a deal is unnecessary for businesses in its member countries. In recent months, Lai has been pivoting to promoting an EPA, which is a type of free trade agreement that the EU already has with certain countries in Africa, the Caribbean, and some Pacific islands. Notably, however, the European officials at this same forum didn't speak much about Lai's proposed EPA. Of course, China is one of the EU's largest trading partners, and Beijing strongly objects to major bilateral agreements between Taiwan and other countries. While Lai says the deal would be a win-win for both sides, it's not clear how much traction the proposal is getting in Brussels, even as Taiwan touts its improving ties with the European Union. Devin Tsai and Chris Gorin for TaiwanPlus.
Leaders of the world's largest economies have gathered in Rio de Janeiro for the G20 summit, with climate change at the top of the agenda. U.S. President Joe Biden, Chinese President Xi Jinping, and French President Emmanuel Macron were among leaders arriving in Brazil for the summit, which comes during the UN's COP29 climate change conference. Observers will be paying attention to how the Group of 20 decides to finance climate solutions, as they make up 85% of the world's GDP, but are responsible for 80% of greenhouse gas emissions worldwide. The G20 will also discuss hunger and poverty, as well as the war in Ukraine. Japan says it will participate in joint military training with the U.S. and Australia next year, citing concerns over threats from China. Top defense officials from the 3 countries released a joint statement saying that China's actions in both the South and East China Sea are destabilizing and a serious concern. The planned exercises will be held in 2025 in northern Australia. They will focus on amphibious operations. The South China Sea is one of the most important waterways in the world, with over a third of global trade passing through every year. In recent months, China and the Philippines have clashed over their competing claims, with the U.S. stepping up security cooperation with Manila and other countries in the region. But how will the next U.S. administration deal with these tensions? Our reporter Jaime Ocon spoke to Ray Powell, director of the Sea Light Initiative at Stanford University, to find out more.
Ray, I want to first start off with asking you about what to expect with this next administration, President-elect Trump, and what maybe to expect differently in managing tensions in the South China Sea.
Well, so it's going to take a little bit, of course, to get the nominations through and figure out who is actually going to be in the seat. You know, and what we've seen so far is we've seen some very hawkish names come through, which indicates that, you know, there may be a fairly muscular approach. And you'll recall that in the South China Sea during the first Trump administration, there were quite a lot of, for example, a lot of freedom of navigation operations. They're sort of like a last line of defense. And in a sense, just kind of going back to them was sort of like what we had at the time. But with, you know, now the ability to do multilateral sails in the South China Sea, I wouldn't be surprised to see a lot more of those.
And how do you think the Philippines is reacting to this, all this rhetoric from the Trump administration, or this incoming administration about more engagement in Asia?
Well, Trump will always push allies to do more. But having said that, the Philippines has done more, and I think that they can make a pretty substantial case in that direction. So, you know, Trump tends to be worried about imbalances if he thinks that the U.S. is paying too much and that other countries that should be paying more should be paying more. I don't think that the Philippines will have a hard case to make that they have actually been stepping up to the plate a lot. In fact, they have very much been on the front lines, and I think that he should appreciate that. And of course, mostly they will be dealing not with Donald Trump himself, but with his appointees. And again, all of the appointees that I've seen in the national security space, for the most part, have been, you know, very, I would say, alliance friendly, actually, on the international stage. And in fact, the Secretary of State nominee, Marco Rubio, wrote a very prominent article last year in the National Interest, basically saying that, you know, the U.S. should lean into the Philippine alliance.
Do you think maybe there's an opportunity for the Philippines to ask something different of the United States now that this next administration is coming in? Maybe something that they couldn't ask the previous Biden administration?
I think that, you know, from a Philippines perspective, because they have been so tight with the U.S. on the alliance, being able to talk about, you know, trade arrangements or even economic arrangements that are sort of China-free. So if you want to build a China-free supply chain, come to us in the Philippines, because, you know, unlike maybe some of other Southeast Asian or other Asian neighbors, we don't have that tight relationship with China. And you can sort of, if you're trying to make, you know, your supply chains resilient against China, then the Philippines is a destination you should look hard at.
That was Ray Powell, director of the Sea Light Initiative at Stanford University. People in China are calling on authorities to do more to protect them. The country has seen its second mass casualty attack in a week, raising concerns that economic pressure is pushing more disgruntled citizens over the edge. Joyce Tseng reports.
Gathering in grief amid heavy security outside this vocational college in Wuxi, eastern China. 8 people were stabbed to death here by a rampaging 21-year-old man who also injured 17 others. Police say the perpetrator, now in custody, grew angry after he failed an exam and could not graduate. It's the second mass casualty attack in China in a week.
每个人的心态都是没有之前那么健康了，所以现在感觉好像就是为什么大多数现在年轻人为什么不愿意结婚？我觉得也有这方面的原因吧。 可能自己连自己的生存都保证不了。
Just days earlier, China was shaken by its worst mass killing in a decade. In the southern city of Zhuhai, a 62-year-old man rammed his car into crowds at a sports center, killing 35 people and severely injuring 43 others. This attack coming as a shock to the country of 1.4 billion citizens, used to living with one of the lowest violent crime rates in the world due to strict gun controls and stringent mass surveillance. It's prompted orders directly from Chinese President Xi Jinping, a rare issuance seen to reflect the sensitivity of the incident.
根据习近平重要指示，中央已派工作组赶赴当地指导处置工作。
As the public increasingly expressed concern online, censors took down videos of the attack and moderated social media discussions, common practice by the Beijing government to control content it deems overly sensitive. Workers also cleared memorials set up for victims, removing flowers and blowing out candles. Now, after this second deadly incident, citizens are urging authorities for more meaningful support. Wary of the growing violence, people are pointing to economic pressure and degrading mental health as underlying problems, with household incomes falling and a spike in youth unemployment.
但直白一点，就是可能以后还会有。我觉得可能以后还是说，希望我们的就是一些管理啊，各方面的机构啊，管理啊，预防啊，这种能及时做到位。
China is still working to find a solution for its economic slowdown. Its recent stimulus package still underwhelming investors. The stakes for its government now higher in the face of growing frustration and unrest from its citizens. Luffy Li and Joyce Zhen for TaiwanPlus.
Super Typhoon Man-yi has made its second landfall in the Philippines, bringing heavy rain and severe winds across the main island of Luzon. More than 1 million people have been ordered to evacuate ahead of the storm. Man-yi is the 6th major storm to hit the Philippines in a month. The earlier storms killed at least 160 people. Hundreds of anglers cast their lines in an eco-friendly fishing competition in southern Taiwan on Sunday. The competition took place at a reservoir in Hutopi scenic area in Tainan City. Participants used eco-friendly lures and targeted only invasive species. The event's organizers say they hoped it would help educate children and promote sustainable fishing. NASA and Taiwanese researchers have released the findings of a joint air quality survey they conducted at the start of the year. The results reveal what parts of Taiwan have polluted air and why pollution lingers there. John Rentriest reports.
We're back in smog season, when air pollution becomes a more apparent problem, especially in the industrial cities of Taiwan's south. But thanks to a research project conducted at the start of the year, scientists have a clearer picture of where this pollution comes from and why it tends to linger, a possible starting point for future environmental policies. This was an international effort, a collaboration between NASA and Taiwanese institutions. As part of a bigger Asian air quality survey, NASA aircraft crisscrossed Taiwan in February and March, analyzing pollution at different altitudes. Among the takeaways, in some kinds of weather, when contrary winds blow, polluted air can get stuck, blown first one direction, then another, in an endless loop.
这个不同风向造成的就是一个涡旋，而涡旋的结果就是在污染物散不出去，没有办法扩散。
But polluted air can still rise quite high. In some cases, air quality 200 to 500 meters up can be even worse than on the ground. Much of this pollution has been traced back to the petrochemical industry. Some scholars are already thinking about the origins of this pollution and the need to keep them in check.
这些高活性的东西是我们最在意的。然后你会看到浓度那么高所以当然这是我们下手的对象，毫无疑问。所以源头的管理还要精准化。
And there's optimism the project's findings will lead to policy changes that will make the air better.
未来这些的资料都可以对应到的产业别，甚至未来都有机会甚至到哪一个特定的工业区，可能是哪一根的特殊的烟囱所排放的，都可以一清二楚。
Taiwanese academics involved in the project are also pleased with the success of Taiwan-made measuring equipment used in surveying. And they say with the project's results starting to come in, they'll be able to make more accurate models, getting a better idea of what pollutants are a problem and where they're coming from. The approach of winter means smog even in places far from the worst of the pollution, places like Taipei. With our new data in hand, though, academics and policymakers can address this bad air, helping the country breathe easier. Chris Ma and John Van Trieste in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
Thank you for watching What's Up Taiwan. You can visit the TaiwanPlus website or follow our social media for more stories from Taiwan and around the world. Finally, check out these kite surfers catching some air at the Freestyle Kite World Cup in Brazil. I'm Erika Liu. Take care and see you next time.